Oh, pardon our interruption. I guess we had a power spike of some sort. I understand that right now we're going through some very significant solar storms, and it could well have been something to do with the satellites that we have to use as the uplinks. I'm broadcasting to you from the middle of the Caribbean Sea, so things like Starlink. Satellites make a big difference for us, and they aren't happy players when the sun sends out lots of cosmic rays and energy bursts, which have been quite prevalent here recently. So we'll continue. Just back up just a bit from where we were, and you can see we have the Wookiee who is now joining us in this episode. We'll try to return where we were, which is I had read to you the first statement of Dowd's sixth Mizmowr psalm, and it reads, Yahweh, you consistently prove your case through me with pervasive arguments which vindicate me and which acquit through me, thereby eliminating everything displeasing and disagreeable. Your instructions enable me to be correct, and you are never overly protective nor antagonistic. And we've gone through now multiple times what all of those things mean. And one of the things I want to share with you is the realization that Yahweh is on record here through Dowd, who was a prophet, telling us that he wants to help us become right with him so that we can be vindicated and so that we can serve as a means to acquit others. And this is a tremendous rebuke of religion, because in Judaism, there is no indication that the Savior is David, and yet that's exactly what God said through him at this moment. And there is no means to be right with God. They have to be right with their religion, and that's a very, very different thing. And with Christianity, they claim that the Torah cannot save, and that was all that Dowd had to learn from to be right with God. It was the only means for God to vindicate him and to acquit us through him. It was the only means for our guilt to all be banished, as the opening line of this states. And of course, in Islam, all you have is regurgitated Talmud stories, so it's no better in this regard. So the truth is that this statement is wholly destructive to religion. When somebody holds up their Bible and says, every word of this is true, they've got no clue. Yes, there are parts of it that are true, but not the part that they care about, which is the addendum at the end called the New Testament that repudiates everything that came before it. And so you can't have a religion based upon annulling the Torah and replacing it by a gospel of faith when Dowd says that vindication comes through him. It's just not possible, particularly since in the Christian New Testament, Dowd is dead and buried, so that the proponents of the Christian New Testament, particularly Peter and Paul, could rob Dowd of all of his achievements and accolades and create the myth of Jesus based upon them. It's just deadly to Christianity. And of course, in Judaism, they have never recognized Dowd as the Messiah or the Savior, so it's equally devastating to Judaism. Now, this affirmation of the Torah's role in our salvation is undeniably established throughout Dowd's life and through his lyrics, and lives plural. He is the antidote for the false perceptions that are contained in the Talmud and the New Testament. By closely examining and carefully considering the Torah, and by listening to the revelations Yahweh conveyed to the prophet Shamuel, Dowd came to know and trust Yahweh. A highly imperfect man was made perfectly vindicated, becoming Yahweh's beloved son and our Savior as a result. Now, this is the realization that is lauded so beautifully, because it really is obvious, by Dowd in one of his nines. You have the 19th Mizmowr, or 19th Psalm, which is one of our very favorites. I'm going to share a line from it in a moment. You have the 91st, which delineates all of the protection that God provides those who serve with him. You have the 119th, which is this studious study, really, of all that the Torah has to offer, written in alphabetical order through the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, with 8 stanzas devoted to each of those 22 letters. And then, of course, you have the 89th, which, as I've shared before, is the greatest piece of literature ever written. So here in the 19th, we read, "On behalf of the eternal and glorious one, a Mizmowr, a psalm of Dowd. The heavens quantify the unit of measure exactly and accurately, the manifestation of power, the glorious presence, and the overall significance of God. Its expansion and expanse make his conspicuous handiwork known." That is Mizmowr 19:1. We've talked about that briefly. The earth is essentially Eden. The earth will be transformed back into the conditions of the Garden of Eden. It is a protective enclosure that's conducive to life. The very fact now that we can look out over this universe and recognize there is nothing but death out there, that there is no life out there, that this little blue marble that we have that spins in space, this beautiful environment you see surrounding me here today, is making God's handiwork conspicuous. He created this planet so that it would be conducive to the very lives that we're living. And yet the universe, with 2 trillion galaxies with hundreds of billions of stars each, gives you a sense of God's overall significance. He has to be greater than the 6-dimensional universe that he created. So he is at least 7 dimensions. And each dimension is an infinite increase in ability, power, capability, you name it. So this is something that is profoundly important for us to understand. He would go on to say, "Day unto day pours out a proliferation of answers, words which explain. Night unto night reveals knowledge, which leads to understanding." This was actually a inside statement here. You got to be with the program to appreciate it. Dowd's pretty smart dude, and if you're going to keep up with him, you're going to have to get up pretty early in the morning before the sunrise and stay up and work at it long after the moon arises. What he is saying here is that, well, there is a greater luminary, he happens to be it, and there is a lesser luminary, I happen to be it, and that our purpose is to serve as signs for the Moedim, which are the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony that are fulfilled as Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym, which Dowd has fulfilled, Shavuah and Towrah, which is my responsibility, coming to Kippurim and Sukkah, which we will enable together. And so the 4th day of the creation account is a proclamation of this greater and lesser luminary that work together, with the lesser luminary reflecting the greater luminary's light, just as I'm sharing the magnificence of Dowd with you and explaining that is the purpose of this statement. During the daytime, it pours out a proliferation of answers. That comes from Dowd, which explain everything we're considering. Night unto night, with the lesser luminary reflecting the brilliance of the greater luminary, reveals knowledge and understanding. And guess what? Just as I have explained that Dowd is the tree of lives in the center of that garden, and now as the centerpiece of the earth, in the center of God's story, living 3,000 years from our expulsion from the garden and 3,000 years before our return, there was another tree in that garden. It was the tree of knowledge. It is the Etzah De'et that is spoken of in relation to the Towrah, the one man that God imbued with his 7 spirits, including the spirit of that tree and the spirit of knowledge that it provided. The Towrah, who is the lesser luminary, the one reflecting the sun's brilliance, is the source of knowledge. And it is, of course, revealed during the night as the moon reflects the sun's light during this time of darkness before the great luminary returns. Mizmowr 19:2. Nothing exists and everything is senseless without the word. Without these answers and promises, nothing matters or survives when and where the spoken and written message of the voice which calls out is corrupted or is negated, when it becomes nameless and no longer heard, regarded, or understood. Mizmowr 19:3. We're back into the exact same situation where Dowd is providing a prophetic account of how we would work together. The fact of the matter is, if you are unwilling to listen to Yahweh speak through his cold voice today, without you considering what is written in these books, YadaYahowah. This is the series on an introduction to God. That happens to be the great Isaiah scroll there in this picture. There are 35 of these books. They're all free at YadaYahowah.com. And they're the first to accurately present Yahweh's testimony in an amplified fashion, in a means that you can use to verify every translated word for yourself, stripped of the diacritical religious markings of the Masoret rabbis, so that God's message is as clear and as profound and as complete as it has ever been. That is the purpose of those 35 books. They are all available to you for free. Without those answers, what Dowd is saying is that the earth simply ceases to exist. Without the spoken and written message of the voice who calls out. Yeshayah speaks of the voice who calls out in the wilderness at this time to make the way back to Yahweh clear of obstacles. It is the very role that I have been asked to play. Now, again, I don't care whether you want to believe that no one is ever going to fulfill those prophecies, or that now 8 years before Yahweh's return, that I am the only one who has filled all of the requirements to be the living embodiment of those prophecies. What I care about is that you recognize that the spoken and written message that is in these 35 books, this is one of those 35 books, all free at YadaYahowah.com, as well as this spoken message through the Yahweh vlog, which was predicted also through Yahweh's prophets of this same individual. He is called Ha-Nakri, the observant foreigner, in the Torah and in the writings. And in this regard, Dowd realizes that without this voice, without that written and spoken message, then frankly, the earth ceases to exist. There is no reason for any of it. And if that message is corrupted or negated in any way, if it becomes nameless and you lose the Yada and you lose the Yahweh, then it is all for naught. If it's no longer heard, regarded, or understood, it's as if the human experience is over. And the reason for that is because no one would know Yahweh's name. You wouldn't know where you are on the timeline. You wouldn't know who fulfilled Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym or how to capitalize upon them. You would not know that Dowd is the ultimate answer, the exemplar of all of these things, that he is the returning king. You would not know when Shabuah and Towrah, these final ingatherings, would occur. You would not know that Dowd is coming back for the family reunion on Kippurim, or that we are returning to Eden on Sukkah, nor have any clue as to why we were kicked out of Eden and why we're being allowed back in. Without those answers, there is no hope for this planet. And so Dowd, our king, wants that understood. We collaborate together. He is the king, I am his herald. Now, this serves as a brilliant introduction to rather a profoundly important statement. Dowd would write, Yahweh's Torah, his teaching, his guidance, it's complete, ideal, restoring and transforming the soul. Yahweh's testimony is trustworthy, it's reliable, making understanding simple for the open-minded. Mizmowr 19:7. It is true that Yahweh's Torah teaching and guidance is complete. It is filled with marvelous prophecy and inspiring history. It is literally a textbook on how to operate our lives, how to get the most out of our souls, how to live the most productive, happiest, and most beneficial, productive lives. It is the guide to how we actually live another life beyond this one as part of God's covenant family. It is the means to our restoration. We find the transformation of our soul presented through Pesach, Matzah, and Bikuwrym, Shavuot, Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. It is the very source that makes understanding available. Now, I would differ here a little bit from Dowd, and I guess that's okay, in that while I realize that being open-minded and being willing to consider what Yahweh has to say, to remove all traces of religious and political lies so that you're in a position to be open to Yahweh's testimony, because it leads you in the opposite direction of religion. While I realize that makes it possible to go from knowing God's Torah teaching and guidance, and it's not law, directions and instructions, to understanding them, that's beyond making the connections. I have never seen it as something that was simple. The process is fairly simple. Study what Yahweh said, build up a base of knowledge, make the connections to go from knowing to understanding. It is yada to bien, using chakma, which is intelligence. So yes, I understand that is the process. I have deployed that process for 24 years and will devote the rest of my life to that process, which is a very, very, very long time. Dowd was brilliant, and maybe his mind was more even receptive, and he processed information faster than I do. And I've got a pretty reasonably fast, my mind works reasonably well. My IQ is well over 180. I do think very quickly, and I process information logically, rationally, and have a standard operating procedure for analyzing God's testimony. It's something that has seldom been done, such that I prove the conclusions that I make and lead you to an understanding of who Yahweh is, what he's offering, and what he expects in return. And I'm among the very first to know that not only is Yahweh God's one and only name, but that the Torah is not law, and that Hebrew has no word for obey. Torah means teaching and guidance. And I have come to recognize that the Torah is not just a history book. It's all prophetic. Even the story of creation, the 6 days of creation, which, by the way, play out over 15 billion years when you understand the concept of relativity and what God actually said. The 15 billion years, and that's more likely the number once we deal with the temperature of quark confinement and the realization that the James Webb telescope is showing us that the universe is older than what we had thought. I think we're going to settle in about 15 billion years to the time of the Big Bang, which is a term that Yahweh coined some 3,500 years ago, is that when you realize that God's telling the story from the point of creation where time would have slowed, and we know the rate that time slowed, which was 10 to the 12th power based upon the cosmic radiation, a microwave that we can actually designate and observe even today, that when you take 15 billion years and you realize that time slowed by 10 to the 12th power, as is evidenced by the microwave energy still emanating from that Big Bang, we know that take 15 billion years divided by 10 to the 12th power, you know what you end up with? 6 24-hour days. Well, the Torah is complete. It's an accurate presentation of our history going back 15 billion years. It's 10 billion years before the earth even existed. Even the Earth's existence was something fairly extraordinary, because the Earth is actually a product of a planet the size of Mars and the Earth colliding, and out of that collision, our moon, which is exceedingly large for the size of our planet, emerging from that collision that occurred 4.5 billion years ago. And that's when we even had this possibility of the witness that we're talking about, with the moon reflecting the sun's brilliance. So here we are, and Yahweh wants us to know, Dowd, his beloved son, wants us to know that we can trust Yahweh's Torah teaching and his guidance, and that his testimony is always reliable. If you go where the words lead, they will lead you to understanding. And while Dowd found that simple, since he was open-minded to it, I've devoted 24 years of 6 and 7 days a week and 12 to 14 hours a day to this process. I've learned a lot. And while I don't think any of it has been particularly difficult, so I would agree with him on that, it is work, rewarding work. The process, if it were so simple, then I wouldn't have been the first to deduce these insights. So we're gonna arm wrestle over what is the proper definition of simple in this regard. I will just tell you that it's possible. And now that I've done all the heavy lifting for you, I've translated so much of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms accurately from the oldest extant resources in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and removed all of the rabbinical copy editing, and presented these words so that you can look up the Hebrew text yourself through any search engine and verify that these translations are accurate. And then I've made the connections to other things that God has said through all of his prophets, so that you can actually go from knowing to understanding. So I've made it a lot simpler. But, just to read those 35 books, if you devoted several hours every night, it's over a year's worth of evenings to get that done. So Yahweh's directions are correct, promoting a right attitude while facilitating good judgment. Yahweh's terms and conditions of his covenant are purifying, illuminating the proper perspective. Well, I agree with all of that. Revering and respecting Yahweh purifies and perfects forever. Yahweh provides the just means to resolve disputes and is reliable, and he is vindicating. This is Mizmowr Psalm 19:1 through 3, and then 7 through 9. That is very much a summation, if you will, of what Dowd conveyed to us in Mizmowr 6:1. So as we have just noticed, the personal application of this realization is what was expressed in Mizmowr Psalm 6:1, which was introduced by these words, "To the enduring leader," accompanied by string instruments, above and beyond the 8th octave, a song of Dowd the beloved. 8th octave, because 8 is essential to this story. We are living in the realization that from the time that we exited the garden to the time that we return 8 years from now will be 6 octaves, 6,000 years. The 7th is from the time we're allowed back into the garden, which will be the 7th of October, 2033, and year 6,000 Yah, with that tree of lives and the tree of knowledge back rooted together and intertwined in the center of what is now important here on earth, for this remnant to enjoy. We will have 1,000 years to prepare this mortal remnant of Yisrael for being released from this protective enclosure of the earth, and that will be year 6,000 to 7,000 Yah. Then we will move from there to eternity, which is this 8th octave, where we can soar through the universe, through dimensions and time, through space-time with Yahweh. So this is the very thing that we are being offered and we can enjoy looking forward to. Yahweh, you consistently prove your case through me with persuasive arguments, which vindicate me and acquit through me, thereby eliminating everything frustrating, displeasing, and disagreeable. That's the purpose of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikuwrym. Your instructions enable me to be correct and teach me about vindication, and you are never overly protective or antagonistic. 6:1. In both secular and sectarian circles today, the God of the Bible, especially the one portrayed in what they errantly refer to as the Old Testament, is considered hostile and wrathful, angry and resentful. And to some extent he is, but not the way it's interpreted. And yet, that is not how Dowd perceived him, because that is not how Yahweh and Dowd interacted together. They had a father and son relationship. It is the one that God intends for us. He is only antagonistic on those who introduce false gods, who claim to speak for him and yet promote false gods like Jesus Christ and Allah or Hashem, for example. So no one knew God better than Dowd did, and yet Dowd has the opposite view of his relationship with Yahweh than do the religious. So in this statement, there is yet another pervasive myth that is obliterated. Now, based upon what we have learned from the inspired lyrics scribed by Yahweh's chosen shepherd, his anointed Messiah and beloved Son, nothing is more important than being correct with regard to Yahweh's testimony, especially as it is presented in his Towrah regarding his Mikre, leading to the benefits of the Bereth. It is Yahweh's instructions which make the kind of relationship and outcome Dowd enjoyed possible. The guidance he followed and the directions he learned are all for our benefit. And since his assessments and insights are readily available, and recognizing that it's an open book test, please read it for yourself. It's an open book test, but you will be tested. God is expecting things from you if you're going to be engaged in a relationship with him. Now, through a lifetime of personal devotion and experience, given every opportunity to know Dowd and realize what he has achieved with Yahweh, we know that Yahweh, Chanan, wants to enjoy a compassionate and kind, lenient and merciful, kind and affectionate relationship with us. And even though no one has ever been held to the status of, with Yahweh, of Dowd, his beloved son, he recognized that his relative position and thus his position with Yahweh is to intervene, to Rapha, to promote Yahweh, and to help us find a more favorable state. So at long last, we move on to the second statement of the 6th Mizmowr, and we will conclude our program here because it will have been an hour with the two halves, and we do want to get to a vlog on the blog, which is the next program that we're going to deliver, and would love to be able to do that forthwith. So he wrote, "You want to be kind to me, choosing to show compassion and mercy, indeed favoritism through me. Chananane, of your own volition, you are generous towards me." This was written in the call, imperfect, literal interpretation, conveying the will of, the choice, the volition of the person being spoken of as you, which would be God. To be genuinely lenient and beneficial by choice, Yahweh. This very accurate representation of the pronouncement of God's name. For I am incapable of accomplishing this on my own. There are those who have written that Yahweh alone saves, and so we don't need any stinking Dowd to do any salvation for us. Therefore, it is a myth to say that Dowd fulfilled Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym, even though that means that you'd have to negate most of what's in the Mizmowr and most of what's in the prophets, and you'd be left with a Towrah unfulfilled. But nonetheless, they take that point of view. And my retort is always the same. Yes, it's true. Yahweh alone saves. It's just that Yahweh always works through people of his choosing to accomplish whatever he wants done. Yahweh saved the children of Israel from dying in Mitzrayim, but he did so through Moshe. Yahweh revealed the great prophetic text of Yashayah, but he did through Yashayah. Yahweh defended Israel, brought them into Israel, protected them, acquired Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, because he made the promise that he would do those things, but he did them through Dowd. And yes, Yahweh saves us through Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym, but it was Dowd's body who fulfilled Pesach, and his soul that was enabled to fulfill Matzah by all that Yahweh had done with him and through him. We have Wookiee noticing that Kara has arrived and that Leah is therefore soon to follow. So we have all wiggles and tail wags at this point. So it is true that Yahweh alone saves. It's just that Yahweh never works alone. So if you want to understand the means to our salvation, you want to appreciate all that God has to offer through this process, then what you need to do is have an appreciation of the fact that Yahweh worked through Dowd. That's why he says, I'm incapable of accomplishing this on my own. Dowd volunteered to fulfill Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym, but he could not do it on his own. God had to bring his nefesh soul back and put it in a bashar body for him to fulfill Pesach, and then make it count to open the doorway to life. And Yahweh had to be the one who escorted Dowd's soul through his Ruach spirit into Sheol to carry our guilt there. He had to be the one that even laden his soul with our guilt so that Pesach could serve as it was intended, on making us not guilty so that we could enjoy being part of God's family. And it was Yahweh who was the one who designated Dowd as his Bakor, firstborn son, so that he could fulfill Bikuwrym through him. So yes, it's true that Yahweh, that I am incapable of accomplishing this on my own. They work together. God always collaborates. It has been the case of Yahweh from the beginning. Even before the children of Israel told God to shut up and to go away, they never wanted to hear from him or see him again. Even before that moment, God had decided that he would work through people. It is why he reached out to Moshe before the Exodus began. This goes on to say, you have chosen to promote healing and restoration through me. Rava, you want me to be acceptable, to promote recovery in others, Yahweh, because my essential essence is anxious and eager to hasten this, what will be a terrifying process. Mizmowr lyrics to sing Psalm 6:2. Dowd knew that he was going to endure crucifixion from the beast of Rome to fulfill Passover, and that would not be the worst of it, because his nefesh soul would carry our guilt into Sheol on Matzah. He knew that was going to occur. He knew what the benefits were going to be. He stepped up and did it anyway. He manned up. He became the ultimate Gabor. He was right about Yahweh. He knew that the 2 days that he would endure of this torment would serve the remnant of Yisrael forevermore, would enable the promises of the covenant, would enable us to collaborate, and invite you to capitalize on these very things. This is how Yahweh chose to work through the man whom he came to love, to trust, to rely upon, to enjoy his company, as a hope that he one day does yours as well. So thank you for listening. This is the conclusion of our Ocean Studio Part 2 of the Yahweh vlog today, as we deliver on God's message through the voice.